things we haven't experimented with yet in 3D Studio Max are the shapes in the Creation tab, and also some of the modifiers. We're going to first look at some shapes and then see how to modify them, particularly using the Extrude option. Once you have clicked on the Shapes tab, be sure you have the Splines option selected from the pull down menu underneath. And let's first start out by drawing a line. Notice there's a number of options under the Creation method rollout. Click on that if you don't already have it rolled out. And right now I'm showing a line that's going to be drawn using sharp corners instead of smooth corners. Okay, so the line command allows us just to click and draw lines. And if we get close to the original starting point, 3D Studio Max will ask if we want to close the spline. In most cases you do want to close the spline, so we'll say yes to that question. Okay, let's try drawing another line, this time using the smooth type, and let's see what happens when we draw these lines. Notice how the line is kind of curving as we're clicking the points, so it will give us a nice little curved shape. Now that we have a couple of shapes drawn with the line command, let's see what we can do with these shapes using what's called an Extrude modifier. So I'm going to first click on one of the shapes to select it. Then I'm going to select the Modify tab, and then from the modifier list I'm going to scroll down and find the Extrude modifier. And if you notice in the parameters rollout that appears, click on that if you need to see the parameters. You can specify the amount of the extrusion. In this case, let's just try 10 units and see what happens. Alright, so we see how that the Extrude modifier extruded and made this shape 10 inches high or 10 inches thick, however you want to describe it. Right now this shape appears solid. Notice you have a couple capping options. If we turn those off, we can see that we can make this thing hollow by unchecking the cap start and cap end options under the Extrude modifier. Also right now in our extruded shape, we see under the parameters rollout that there's only one segment by default. And if we change this, say to 10 segments, we're not going to see much happen. But what we may want to do is left click up in the upper left corner of the 3D Studio Max viewport where it says realistic or shaded or whatever you have this set on, and choose the edged faces option. That way we can see the edges of all these segments. Before there was one, so if we return that to 1, we see how there's no segments, but if we put it back to 10, you can see how the shape is divided up into 10 segments. This will come in later. This will come in handy later on when we start using some other modifiers. Okay, so let's review. We first click on the shape we want to extrude. We make sure we have the Modify tab selected, and then from the modifier list we scroll down until we find the Extrude command. Then we tell it the amount we want to extrude. In this case I'm going to make it 20 units, and then we hit enter and we should see the extrusion, and we can control the number of segments that the extrusion might have by entering a value for those options. And we can see those options by making sure we have the edged faces chosen in the viewport settings. Alright, let's go back to the Creation tab and play with some of the other shapes. I'm going to try the donut. With the donut I can click a center point, drag this thing out, have the outer edge of the donut, and then I can determine how big the donut hole should be. Notice these values are located under the parameters rollout for the donut. Right now my radius 1 is 14.893. I'm going to make that an even 20. And my radius 2, which is the donut hole, I'm going to round that up to a 5 for my radius. Alright, let's go back to the Modifier tab, and with the donut selected, let's add a Extrude modifier to the donut, and let's see what the Extrude does to a donut. And there we can see the results. So feel free to go back and play with some of these other shapes and maybe apply some Extrude modifiers to those shapes and see what interesting objects you can come up with. One final thing about the donut extrusion I forgot to mention. If we click the donut in the extrude option and choose the mesh output option, we can see our donut looks solid instead of looking hollow with the patch option selected.